Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our very first Fireside Chat. I'd like to start off by introducing myself. My name is Dennis Palmer, and I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Building Solutions. I have some wonderful panelists with me today, and I'll introduce them in just a sec. But before that, a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the webinar, please pose your questions in the chat box and we'll answer them at the end. This panel will be recorded and available on our website in the next couple of days. And lastly, we'll be announcing our next conversation and panelists soon. So stay tuned for more information. At Building Solutions, we're celebrating 30 years in business, and in commemoration, we've committed to a year-long educational equity campaign we're calling Building Solutions for Brighter Futures. Our goal is to close the growing gap in academic achievement for underrepresented students in North Texas and model how a focus on facilities can move the needle on educational equity. Part of this campaign is dedicated to raising awareness of the inequalities in school facilities in order to champion successful learning environments for K through 12 students in DFW. To do so, we're hosting a series of fireside chats where we've invited education, business, and industry leaders, like our panelists today, to discuss topics related to educational equity. With that said, I'd like to introduce our panelists here with me today. First, we have my friend, business partner, and CEO of Building Solutions, Bill Kessler. Second, we have Dr. Terry Flowers, the Perot family headmaster of St. Philip's School and Community Center. And lastly, Dr. Cheryl English, clinical associate professor at SMU's Simmons School of Education and Human Development. Thank you for joining us for this incredibly important and timely discussion on COVID-19 and its impact on students. We really appreciate having all of you here today, and we hope this conversation can shed some light on the issues surrounding the pandemic and education. And with that said, let's get into the questions. Dr. English, what has SMU learned about the pandemic effect on academic achievement among K-12 students? What are some of the major differences amongst students, and what barriers have caused these differences?
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you all, Building Solutions, for having this, giving us this opportunity. So in the Department of Teaching and Learning at SMU, teacher education professors like myself spend a great deal of time reading about research and trying to figure out, what is going to work, not only for the work that we do, but of course for the work that is taking place across the country in K-12 classrooms. And one of the premier journals that we like to really take a look at in terms of research is the American Educational Research Journal. And they published a study last summer that I thought was quite interesting. It actually revealed that more than half of US students have experienced summer learning losses 5 years in a row. Now, as educators, we are well aware that students of color and economically disadvantaged students who do not experience rich learning opportunities during the summer will encounter what we call summer slide. And that is where academic achievement disparities disproportionately widen for those students during the summer. As a result of the pandemic, though, the learning loss really, I guess, caused by students not actually having the opportunity to physically be in the classroom since last March. I think we all, as educators, realized that we are in for an unusually long summer. Now, ordinarily, you might say, well, geez, teachers and students should be very, very happy about that. But, after a while, students really began to realize, wait a minute, I'm not learning, I'm just going through the motions. And I think as teacher educators, we have a tremendous opportunity to teach and learn with remarkable teachers like Dr. Flowers was just talking about, and the sacrifices that they have had to make in order to help students and to help families. I teach a course called Student Voice, and I encourage my teachers to do what I would call informal research. So it's not anything that necessarily would be published, but it's certainly important to the work that they are doing in their classrooms with their students. And what teachers realized is that, students are facing not only major barriers, but different types of barriers. Some of the students indicated that they not only missed their peers, but they missed the teacher student relationship. And
Mm,
we know that the relationships that teachers have with their students is paramount to student learning. Also, we know that learning is a social process, right? In the classroom, teachers place their students in small groups, and students have a chance to bounce their ideas off of other students. When students are missing those types of opportunities, of course, there's loneliness, and they begin to feel like, am I learning? Where's the routine of the classroom? Also, I think one of the major concerns with COVID-19 and how it has impacted the academic learning of students is social emotional learning. Um, we know that many after school care programs, even at St. Philip's, offer students learning outside of the everyday math, science, reading, or whatever. And what students have the opportunity to do is they learn social skills, they learn about academic perseverance, mindsets, just things that are so important to their academic learning in the classroom. And we began to realize, or at least my teachers did, that students are missing that. I had an opportunity the other day to speak with a director. I think she's at Literacy Achieves, and she told me about this, her little pre-K and kindergarten students who ordinarily would just be bundles of energy and running around and having a great time and learning. And they are now almost sitting in corners, kind of maybe even being depressed, even when they are in the space of after school learning. And we know that that is not normal for young children. So those are barriers that we know that when children get back in school, we are going to have to address those. I would say this though, all in all, we know both from research and our frequent encounters with teachers and students that quantifying the short term and long term academic and non academic impact of COVID 19 is going to be ongoing until we can fully understand how to help our students recover and grow despite the barriers that we're all facing.
oh man, Dr. English, thanks for that. I would like to have a follow-up question for you. That whole, I think parents are very aware of the summer slide. I'm a parent and know that that's a time where uh, your child can forget almost all the wonderful things that they learned. And then to hear that we've been on this 5-year slide, uh, what can parents do uh, during this summer to try to help improve or at least shorten that gap?
Actually, I would say there are two things, and I want to talk certainly about what parents can do, but I also want to speak to the community leaders and corporate organizations as well. So When I was principal, I used to always say, if children are tired because you all have had a long day, you had to run errands after school, please read to your children and read with your children. And I know teachers used to laugh at me and say, Dr. English, did you actually tell them not to do the homework? And it's not so much that I'm saying don't do your homework, but if you have limited time, I would say no matter what, every day, every child should have the opportunity to read for at least 15 to 30 minutes. And so, what parents can do now, read with your children, take out their textbooks or the novels that students are reading, go to the library, check out books, read with your children. That's one way to enhance their vocabulary and any learning loss that is actually taking place, as a result of COVID. But let me speak also, as I said, to the corporate leaders and community leaders. We need rich opportunities for students. I remember when I was in high school, I do remember that. I had the opportunity to have like part-time volunteer jobs. And yes, there's nothing like learning on the job training. And many times I will tell you that students of color and students who are economically disadvantaged, they don't get those opportunities. So, what is one way that we can catch up with some of those um, social emotional skills that I mentioned earlier? Give them the opportunity to work, even if it's only 2 weeks, at a time. Allow them to come into your office and shadow the work that you and your employees are doing, because that is not only one way for them to learn and have academic mindsets and know what's available for their futures, but it also encourages them when they do have the opportunity to get back to school that, oh, now I want to do a better job in school so that I can have future opportunities for learning.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And
Yes.
Bill, I haven't forgotten about you. Uh, as you know, Building Solutions has worked closely with schools for many years. Our work is focused on facilities themselves. In what way do facility operating practices affect learning? What is the significance of building maintenance, and how is it reflected in the effect of the pandemic on a school?
Well, Dennis, as you well know, what we say around here is that facilities exist to facilitate. They are not an end in themselves, but they are a means. So in schools, they facilitate learning and teaching by promoting favorable conditions that are comfortable, less stressful environments. Or learning is like exercising. There is stress needed in order to grow, in order to advance. But too much stress can be harmful. And it also diminishes the potential to be successful. So the whole object, I think, in facilities, particularly in schools, is to manage the comfort and the accommodation of what's really happening there, which is learning. And as Dr. English appreciates from her and Dr. Flowers' comments about teachers, learning is stressful, but teaching is even more stressful. So having facilities that accommodate both teachers and learners is incredibly important. What are those? The things that we think of are just creature comforts, temperature, humidity, having clean, orderly surroundings, certainly health and safety. And health is way up on the list, especially in a post-COVID environment. We'll talk more to that later. Lighting, both artificial lighting, but very importantly, if possible, natural lighting, but controlling those in a way that supports the teaching tools and techniques, so that if the action is happening up at the front of the room on a whiteboard, it's not a whiteboard that has a glare on it, that makes it difficult to see what's being written on it. And then the general ambiance in the space is really important. Now, this is a little more subtle, but when space is allowed to fall into disrepair, that's saying something to the occupants about their importance, about where they are on the priority list. Having drab colors, worn out furniture, arms that are falling off chairs, that sort of thing is, while one may be able to function in a space like that, it's making negative statements that are not uplifting, and they don't add to the dignity of what's going on and the importance of what's going on in the space. So all of those, and there are probably more components that I'm not even enumerating here, but maintenance is probably the most underrated aspect in the whole life cycle of facilities. It's the easiest budget to cut, and it's even an easier budget not to increase as the facilities grow and as systems become even more complex. The operating systems and the more and more digital oriented, digital related controls and devices in space that are the norm. Those things take training to operate, and they take money and effort. Every aspect that I mentioned at the beginning earlier, creature comforts, health and safety, so on and so forth, are touched by maintenance, and they're either made better or worse by good maintenance. Some of the most mundane examples are ones that we have in our own home environments, changing the filters in our air conditioning system, being mindful of the color of the lamps that we put into a light fixture when the lamps burn out, avoiding fumes in building materials that are used, even to the point of having staff trained in a way that they know what work generates noise and commotion that would interrupt learning, and when that should be done or can be done, and when it should not be done. I think one of the least appreciated until recently is the invisible thing called ventilation, the introduction of fresh air or filtered air into space. As we are all aware, COVID-19, which is an airborne virus. Not all viruses are airborne. Many of them are, and according to authorities, epidemiologists like Dr. Osterholm, who wrote a really important book on this subject called Deadliest Enemy, very sobering title. This is not the last event like this that we're going to experience. Hopefully we'll be better prepared in the ways that Dr. English and Dr. Flowers have enumerated. We'll be better prepared, and it will be less dire in the future. But preparation is also required, in my view, in the facilities. So we're really strong advocates of looking closely at building ventilation as a foundational piece of indoor air quality that is healthy. Most buildings, many people do not know this, but most buildings are not compliant with current codes and standards regarding ventilation. This is becoming more something that people are more and more aware of now, but every 2 to 3 years, the standards in schools have increased, but there are no mechanisms whereby cities or any authorities require schools to upgrade or to bring their systems into compliance with current standards and codes. There's a lot of research showing, and there has been for decades, showing that learning is more effective in spaces that have healthier indoor air. Health is now taken to a new level of importance when we have viruses around that are literally threatening lives and forcing us to close down facilities. So the importance of minding this research and thinking about ventilation, I think, is even greater than it's been in the past.
Yeah, you know, you and I are both very passionate about buildings and maintenance, and it always seems that we have to have a special event to put our eyes and spotlight on things that we should be focusing on, uh, and not have to be reactive. I would like to probably later on see if you could talk more about some of the studies that ventilation has on our students, because we know there are some really great studies out there that show how performance drops. Doesn't matter how good the teacher is, if you are in a space where uh, you can't breathe correctly, then you're probably not going to learn as well as someone who's in a really nice space with good air, fresh air. Back to you, Dr. Flowers. Because many students weren't able to learn key concepts during the pandemic, what are the implications for schools and for students? And what are the options for recovery?
Thank you for that. So clearly, as Dr. English mentioned with the summer learning slide, that pre-existed, was already present. And so the implications are that there is going to be a need for additional support for students, both in the classroom and outside the classroom. There's going to be a need for parents, as Dr. English mentioned, to be more intentional about supporting their students' learning. We say that a child can't be what a child can't see. Many schools that have, at St. Philip's, we call them academic excursions, but field trips, many of those were disrupted. They also create an opportunity for an extension of the learning. And so one strategy that families might take is to pick up on utilizing the opportunities to visit some of these resources throughout the city, and not just visit to observe and look and point, but really use them as learning opportunities. Many of the summer programs are relaunching. The one here at St. Philip's is reestablished. So taking advantage of those resources as well. But then I go back to the faculty, the teachers, and we must not forget the demand that this is placed on them, and the fact that many have actually departed from the classroom, great teachers, but we took the joy of having their interactions with their students. We didn't take it away, but absent that, that really begins to drain the fuel out of the tanks. I would also encourage everyone to think of this, that for students, school is an outlet. It's actually a chance to get away from your parents and get away from your household and the circumstances in your household. At St. Philip's and at many schools, it's a chance for you to be loved on. So you remember that teacher who would put that gentle hand on your shoulder, or the teacher that would give you the eye, the teacher that would give you that extra push of a jolt of inspiration and motivation. All of that creates a void that has to be replaced or adjusted for in the lives of our students. So I'd encourage everyone to think about it beyond just the impact on the students, but also the faculty.
Thanks for that, Dr. Flowers. I think I'm one, along with many other parents, that I've always appreciated teachers, but during this this period, you probably have grown to appreciate them even more, because it's definitely a arduous job. Dr. English, another question for you. How do we begin to gauge how extreme the learning loss is, and what research is being done to understand this? What will the societal impacts of the learning loss be, and how can we make it up?
Let me start with the latter, the societal impact. I was speaking recently with a friend whose son graduated last year, and we're just talking about how eager he was to walk across the stage after 12 years and have the opportunity to have his name called, and everyone in his family and all of his friends and peers and teachers would all clap. And of course, he missed that. He missed the prom, he missed homecoming, And so when we think about our students, I think we're beginning to understand not only what they have missed, but whether or not they think they will be prepared for that next step. If the next step is college, am I college ready now? I feel like I missed a year and a half of school. Am I fully prepared? And the societal impact of even that says, and honestly, we were already lacking a bit on college and career readiness for students of color and economically disadvantaged students. And so I feel like, we need to be aware that that the loss of learning and the loss of interaction and the loss of just feeling like, did I really graduate, is going to impact their future success in society. And so we need to be understanding of that. And then again, give students opportunities. Society, you can do this. Let them work at the grocery store. Let them, come into your businesses so that not only is it benefiting them, but it's also benefiting society, because they're not just sitting at home trying to figure out for themselves, now where do I go? Back to, I guess, the Dennis, could you repeat the first part of your question again? I just thought about that.
Sure. It was essentially, how do we gauge the extremes of the learning loss and what research has been done to understand this?
So I would say this, there's a lot of research out there, but there is nothing like knowing your students, because the research that might happen for a group of students, who live in New York could be completely different from the research that would actually take place in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I think it's important, going back to that student voice course, I think it's important for teachers and schools to do their own research. Now, I am not specifically talking about academic assessments. I think we have to be very, very careful of that, because when students take assessments and they know that they have not learned, they've missed a full year of learning, and they get the results of those assessments, they could actually go into a spiraling downfall, right? Because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not prepared for the next grade level. So I would say the things that we have to do is we have to begin realizing who the experts are on their own lived experiences. The students are the experts on their lives. Let's talk to them. Let's ask them questions. Ask them what they feel like they need. In what area? Do you feel like you need more help in math? Do you feel like you need more help in reading? How are you from a mental health well-being standpoint? I think the research is right there in the school, asking students specifically, one-on-one or even in small focus groups, asking them questions, taking that information and then using that to inform what you do as you move forward. From the academic perspective, I would say the exact same thing. Teachers always talk about exit tickets, when students leave the classroom after learning whatever the objective was for the day, they get an exit ticket. And the exit ticket is based on what they learned that day. Well, let's give several exit tickets that are specific to subject matter to help students determine and help us determine, where do we need to pick up from here? That not only helps the children, it helps the teachers, but it also helps the parents. You can send home an exit ticket for 1 or 2 specific objectives that say, you know, this is what your child needs to work on today, right? Let's not give them the whole exam and say, wow, they're behind in all of these areas. That is overwhelming for parents, for the children, and of course for the teachers. So I say, let's take it small, baby steps, but use your own learning environment as your research. Focus on your school and on your students and what their needs are.
Oh yeah, oh man, that is it hits home when you say the whole testing and trying to look at the testing before or pre-COVID, and um, it's difficult because we're in that whole scenario right now, and the way my daughter's picking up learning is totally different than the way it was in the classroom, and to try to score her or test her the same way you would as though she was in the classroom environment just doesn't seem right. And then it ends up confusing us on how we should support our child. So I that did resonate with me.
And Dennis, can I mention just real quickly, piggyback on something that Bill said a few moments ago? He was speaking from the standpoint of the learning environment, obviously at schools, but we also have to really be careful to think about the learning environment that children have at home. You know, some children have their own bedrooms and they have, you know, the opportunity to sit at the kitchen table. We didn't have our own bedrooms when I was growing up. And so my mom sat all 3 of us down at the kitchen table, and that's where we did our homework. Now, keep in mind, we didn't have a computer. So now if everyone is at the kitchen table and you're trying to be on the computer and your Zoom is not working, that is totally impacting the learning environment. And teachers have to be aware of that. You can't say, well, you know, you were on Zoom, why didn't you understand? And I think very few teachers would say that, but of course, I didn't understand because I also had my siblings at the table. And oh, by the way, I also had to watch my 2-year-old sister. So the learning environment, both in the classroom and at home, can make a huge difference on the impact of how students are learning.
Great point, and so true. I have a question for all 3 of you. What should the approach be for school reopenings? How do we ensure this is an equitable process? Dr. Flowers, I'll pick you to go first.
You will not ensure that it will be an equitable process because it didn't start off as an equitable process. So that'll be very, very difficult to achieve. But one of the things that we must take advantage of and make sure of is that we don't go back to business as usual. There are certain best practices that we've been able to accumulate through this process that probably should continue. Those hand sanitizer stations that are all over your campuses, leave them up there. The taking of the temperature, not a bad idea to continue to do that. So what are those components that were that you deem to be appropriate for continuing? Some of that we need to continue. We did see an injection of intention for resources coming from the government and other places to try to address the inequities in the access to technology. That's an area that we are in a position that we can continue to try to bring about a little bit more balance, because that will be an ongoing challenge. The opportunity for my child to receive a device from school that was $600 that I couldn't afford before, and I now have it. Well, how long will that device be working? And will there be an opportunity for that to be replenished? Because there is a wave of technology that has come into our classrooms, come into our learning practices that is going to continue. And we need to make sure that we keep children in a position of being able to take access of instruction coming by that mode.
Thank you. Bill.
I struggle with this because I don't want to sound like a cynic or sound negative about this, but I worry not only that we're not going to do away with inequity, but we have set ourselves up, if we're not highly conscious of the impact of obsolete buildings, that we could even exacerbate the gap, exacerbate the differences. And my worry is this, that education facilities in general for decades have been allowed to become obsolete. There is a lot of research on this too. One of my favorites is citing the statistics in the state of Arkansas, where at the time that the study was done, which has now been nearly a decade, something like 80% of the buildings were candidates for demolition and replacement, according to a standard of facility condition that is widely used in the institutional world. 80%. We have a situation in Massachusetts right now, very, very recent research, where 40% of the school districts have over half of their buildings that require upgrades of their HVAC systems. And that's not just bringing them up to what's called an adequate standard of ventilation. Adequate. That adequate is not a word that most of us like in education. We like excellent, but just to be adequate is, we're a long way from that in a lot of places. And I'm afraid that there's ample evidence that it's even, that these differences are even greater right now in urban environments, in facilities that are serving people of color, people with less resources rather than more. Hats off in the city of Dallas. We have passed a record in the state of Texas, record-setting 2021 bond issue of $3.6 billion. That's a lot of money, but it's a public record that that's about half of what's needed to really solve the deferred maintenance and the deferred conditions in the city of Dallas. Those aren't all urban schools. Those are not all schools that are only serving people of color, but it is, but there's more than a there's a disproportionate number, I guess I would say, of obsolete old facilities that are operating in an environment where there is an increasing rate of obsolescence. The technology that Dr. Flowers spoke of is that wave has been necessary and it's been very helpful. But as he knows very well in his school, and all of us involved in education know that technology has a shorter and shorter half-life. So the resources needed and the awareness that's needed of replenishing that resource, just as we need to replenish our buildings, is it's acute.
Bill, I might add, we have hand-me-down campuses. And so if you think of that, for those of you who had older siblings and we have generations of hand-me-down campuses, as we do our communities, and that type of neglect just has to be addressed, because as you said, Bill, it sends a message, and a message that it takes an exceptional environment inside those buildings to help kids to overcome those messages that are so negative and not very uplifting.
Yeah, and what it also tells us is that COVID-19 may have highlighted this, but it was an issue well before that.
Yeah.
Dr. English, I'll give you a chance to.
Yeah, I'll just pipe in just real quickly. So I want to reach out to administrators, and I'd like for them to, from a teacher voice perspective, please make some time as you decide to reopen. Of course, there are policies that all administrators have to follow. Please make some time to listen to your teachers. They are the ones who have actually been either face to face or remote, from the perspective of listening to and working with students. Not only did they know a lot before this pandemic about their children and about the children's learning, but now they know even more, not only about the children, but about the families where the children come from, about their parents, about their households, about whether or not children are eating, 3 meals a day. So your teachers are so aware of what has happened. And I would say before you even think about coming up with a plan, please make some time to listen to teachers. And I know that we have to have standardized assessments. I know that research is so very important. But I would also ask if there is some way for us to allow teachers more opportunity to actually teach and learn with their children, as opposed to an every week, every day assessment to try to figure out where children are. Let's just open up with a way that we listen to teachers, we listen to students. They really are the experts.
Yeah, you're right. And I think for all of you, and I think you've all mentioned this, learning doesn't stop when our students leave school. It continues. And what I think 2020 highlighted is that uh, we probably have focused a bit more on what our students are doing at school. And Dr. English, I think you said it greatly, and Dr. Flowers, about leaving the home and having an oasis and a safe place, because we all know we can learn better when we feel safety and comfort. Bill Kessler talked about the building comfort. We want to alleviate all those stresses. Well, one of those pieces that I think has been steadily missing in this whole village approach is what's happening at home, and how can we make the continuation of learning really easy for the student, to where it's not one extreme at school and then another extreme at home, or it's not one voice at school and one voice at home, but it's a united voice. It's a systematic approach. It's a feeling and a safety from both of those really important locations. So I think one thing this has highlighted is that we were kind of forced to put a lot of the education responsibility on parents. Now parents have had some real boots on the ground experience for about a year and a half. And I hope what we don't do is lose sight of pulling them in closer to help create this village approach of learning. Well, good. I'd like to now bring us to our question and answer session. If you have any questions for our panelists, please share them in the chat box. We'll try to answer as many questions as the remaining time allows. It does look like we have one question for the panelists. I'll go ahead and read that question. What basic things can families do to help students avoid discouragement based on the societal stigma of falling behind in skills and prevent them giving up on learning altogether?
Dennis, at some point, all of our students will be back in school environments. And as a parent, I would say the most important thing that you could do is to inspect, evaluate, and ensure that your child is in an uplifting environment, that it is an environment that speaks to encouragement, that speaks to love, that speaks to motivation, prodding without penalty, encouraging students to press on, and that it is affirming of who they are and whose they are, so that no one has to define and no circumstance can define who they can become. That environment that you have your children in has to pivot to be more welcoming, more inclusive than ever before, because this pandemic era has disrupted the best of those environments in regards to their normal flow of providing that kind of nurturing. We're talking through face masks now, our voices are muffled, we're not able to love on each other as much as we have in the past. So for a parent, just making sure that you're finding the best environment beyond just the ABCs and the math and the STEAM or the STEM. The environment has so much to do with inspiring your children to excel beyond circumstances.
I'd like to add just real quickly to that. When my son, who is definitely grown now and has his own child, but when he was a senior in high school, I remember reading a research study that indicated that we as parents, as our children get older, that we spend less than 2 or 3 minutes a day talking with our children. And I thought, that's ridiculous. I know I spend more than 2 or 3 minutes a day talking with them. But then I actually looked at it and it scared me that I really did not spend more than 5 minutes because, everybody gets up, you're eating breakfast, you're leaving. They have after school activities, they come in at night, they do their homework, they go to bed, and we do the same thing the next day. Oh my goodness, that is so scary. We cannot do that now. Parents, more than anything, talk and listen. Do more listening than talking, if at all possible. Listen to what your children have to say. And may I give you one other thing with everything Dr. Flowers just said? Trust your child's school. Trust them. Trust and believe that they have your child's best interest at heart. If you doubt that at all, go talk to them. Listen to what they have to say. But just knowing that you have them there and they go there every day, it's important for you to trust and know what is going on, not only with the teachers, but also with your children.
Kessler, do you have anything to add, or if not, you're fine.
I'm going to pass so that we can take more questions. I think it's been well said already.
Well, thank you. Speaking of more questions, this has been very exciting and insightful, at least for me, discussion. I hope it has been for the rest of the attendees. Like most things, we've run over. I think we have about 5 minutes left. I know there's some other questions that I see in the chat box. We definitely plan to continue the discussion offline. And as I mentioned earlier on, this is our very first Fireside Chat. We hope to have several more throughout the year. This is, for us, it's like going back to school. And I think one thing that makes our company special is we know what we know, but when we don't know something, we try to go seek the information. And we're very fortunate to know a lot of great and experienced people. And we were very fortunate to have Dr. English and Dr. Terry Flowers along for the ride.
Dennis, may I interrupt? May I ask one
Sure.
question? What
Sure.
does Building Solutions plan to do about some of the inequity. Can you give a little bit of a spill about the project?
Yeah, I sure can. And I think what I'll do is, because at this moment I was going to give my business partner and CEO of our company a chance for closing remarks, so I didn't have all the spotlight on me. So maybe I think that's a good segue. Bill, do you want to try to close us out with some closing remarks?
I'd be delighted. Thank you. Dr. Flowers is one of a handful of education and civic leaders who is part of a committee that we formed when we initiated a campaign for building solutions for brighter futures. Dr. Flowers is a member of our advocacy committee. So all of you probably interact with board members, and he has just done his job as a board member to to ask the leading question. Thank you. So the Building Solutions for Brighter Futures program includes not only hosted events like this that are intended to promote open, honest, and informative discussions about the issue of education equity, but there are two other legs to the stool. One is a mentoring program. We are passionate in our company about the importance of maintenance, you may have noticed. And we have relationships with schools, some going back decades, where we have seen the very positive impact that trained, skilled, motivated, knowledgeable facilities staff, what they can add to the recipe and make for more effective learning environments. So we really believe in that. We believe there's a leverage factor in doing that, and have knowledge as a company and skill and staff in our company who have been and are interested in doing this as a mentoring program to encourage, uplift the status of the maintenance profession in education facilities, and to train people how to do it better, and to help them build bonds among themselves, so that just as teachers network, build more of a propensity to network among people of the facilities profession as well. Third, and I'm going to link this with a plea. Third, we have a program where we have committed to contributing 3,000 professional hours to schools in the North Texas area who are interested in having an equity assessment performed of their facility. Those of you who know our company know that we are very practiced in doing facility condition assessments and reviews of facilities operations. This is not an entirely, but a somewhat different thing. This is looking at school environments through the lens of learning and teaching effectiveness, touching on some of the things that I mentioned in the question that I answered. We have begun that process and are doing equity assessments right now, but we would like to know of other schools that are interested in this. We have a form on our website, I think in the chat box, and following this event, we'll be sending out a link where a school that would like to look into the possibility of having an equity assessment performed pro bono that would be kept, that where any data that's released would be done directly with the school, and then would be at the end part of a cumulative report that is not individualized, so it does not single out any particular campus, but hopefully would promote learning in our industry and in our profession about the kinds of things that we found over the course of the year that would improve learning environments. So thank you for the question, Dr. Flowers, and we would welcome anyone who would like to learn more about that, particularly that third or any parts of the campaign. I think we're getting close to the end of our time, so I'd like to add, Dr. Flowers, Dr. English, add my thanks to the thanks that Dennis has offered. We are both admirers of both of you. You are both legends in this area, in the education world, and in the work that you have both done to promote the effectiveness of education in particularly in those parts of our community that need that sort of support the most. We've discussed a lot of things today. I think some of the takeaways that I have are the very holistic nature of the impacts of COVID-19. I didn't expect us to get into homes and home learning environments, but wow, that is such a great point. I think the importance of teachers and being very teacher-centered in our response and in our, if we might call it an emergency response to the impacts of COVID-19, that we can individualize our analysis and our research around the particulars of each institution, each situation. That requires a lot of bottom-up flow of information, and it places even more importance on our listening to our teachers. And I think I'm also impressed by how complex the impacts have been COVID-19. I guess that wasn't as much a surprise to me, but the details and the sort of complexity of it all, I think, impressed me in this conversation. And that can be overwhelming, but because we're all in the education business, we all know that we learn from things like this. And understanding the complexity is the first step to our being able to be prepared and address it more effectively the next time around. We're going to have a recording of this video. I think Dennis may have mentioned that, but that will be sent out in the form of a link that will enable you to go to that. We're going to have more of these, as Dennis mentioned. If you'd like to learn more about the program, we will also send a link to our web portal. Want to thank not only the panelists today, but thank all of you, the scores of people who have attended this event, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the webinar. Bye.
Bye.